Hello, and welcome to Hospice Insights, the law and beyond, where we connect you to what matters in the ever-changing world of hospice and palliative care.
Audit updates. David beats Goliath. Brian and Emily, I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy to be here.
Thanks to be here, of course.
Well, I know when we were prepping, Emily's like, what is there to talk about? And it's like, I feel like, yes, how many podcasts have we done on this? And for trivia for our listeners, our very first podcast we did, it was February 26, 2019, was Extrapolation is Back. And then we probably done 3 or 4 podcasts since then on extrapolation, but it's the big dollars that everyone's scared about. And I mean, not to bury the lead, but we have had, historic success and then just had some pretty gigantic wins for folks. And so I think what we wanted to cover here is both these victories and sort of the Cliff Notes version of how we won those. And then also talk about some things we're seeing in home health and extrapolation on that front. And then just experience we've had on managed care audits, because, extrapolation can happen there and how that might impact hospice and home health providers. So we got a media agenda. Of course, we always say we will only take 15 minutes. So let's see if that actually works. But Brian, just for a brief historical context, we've been at this a long time and saw great success early on. I guess take me back in the time machine here. And is it different than it was before? Are we winning in different ways? Like, what does the past teach us about where we are now?
Yeah, and thinking about that title from February 2019, at that time it was Extrapolation is Back. And that was the title because years before that, we had first encountered extrapolations and really had great success in overcoming that. And just kind of giving people the context, extrapolation is when an auditor might take 30 claims out of a 2-year period, randomly selected. They'll say what your error rate is after reviewing those claims. Let's say it's 30%. And they'll say from that sample of 30 claims, we think 30% of all the thousands and thousands of claims you submitted during that 2-year period were also an error. So although those 30 claims might be worth 100,000 or so, they'll turn that into 7 million, 20 million, 40 million or more. So it really is an eye-opener, and we still get questions to this day from concerned providers. Is this audit that I have now going to lead to extrapolation? So we beat them back a while ago. They reemerged in February 2019, and they're continuing to this day. And it seems like they're coming up with different strategies. I think they anticipate some of our arguments, but they also make different kinds of errors, and our strategies have evolved as well into how to push back against these extrapolations. And there's always been 2 ways to try to go at these. One is try to attack that underlying error rate by appealing those individual claims. Let's win each one of the claims, get that error rate down, and hopefully you get it down to 0 or so low that the science of statistics just doesn't work. Method number 2 is let's attack that statistical methodology, where you have to hire a statistician, pore over the statistical data, and find flaws in the system. Did they include claims in the universe that should have been excluded and bias the universe? Did they lack the certain precision that some courts have said is minimally required? So still adopting those 2 approaches. But since that first podcast, we've seen the UPICs, the OIG, and as our clients have grown and as we've been involved in other areas, home health clients of ours have been getting extrapolated audits. Emily, you've had experience with managed care organizations and extrapolations, right?
Yeah. Well, just to I was working on the transition, Brian. You got to trust me. I've been at this for 6 years now. So So before we get to managed care, though, I want to shift to you, Emily, because I think as we navigate clients through these issues, which we have oodles of experience on, I think I always try to be that steady hand. And I think the number one thing try to remind people is the beginning is not the end. And there's a lot of twists and turns, but like the beginning, you could have this giant number, but that's not where we're going to end up at the end of the day. And I think, a case you were really heavily involved in is just one of those, and it might be our largest victory to date. But walk me through that case and sort of where did it begin and then where did it end?
Sure. So that case began back in 2021, and so now we're in 2025, and we just got the results of that. The beginning definitely wasn't the end. Of course, it's always very stressful for the time period that you're dealing with it, but once you get to that end, it can be a huge relief. At least when we're involved. That particular audit involved a higher level of hospice care, not your routine home care. And a lot of the claim denials that we originally saw were just sort of shocking. You wouldn't believe that anybody would think that these patients weren't eligible for that higher level of care. But you do start questioning yourself when you see so many of those claim denials. But we stuck with it. We got some experts to evaluate the records, actually multiple experts, and they all felt confident that many of those claims were appropriate. There were, of course, some claims that were conceded or not challenged like the rest of them. And so it's important to go into that process with unbiased eyes and really put all your efforts towards the stronger claim denials. And when you do that and you work hard at it, you can overturn those claim denials that make up the error rate that Brian was just talking about. And that is for this type of audit and this type of overpayment, that is your best chance at getting a full victory, because we can chat about this for a long time, but Brian and I will tell you that you do need to challenge the statistical process, the statistical sampling process, and the way that is done. But anytime there is a victory on that front, it ends up being an appealed decision and drags on for much longer. So put a lot of effort into challenging those individual claim denials.
And I think that the case that we're talking about, I remember reading those decisions and the initial decisions that we got. And I was like, I don't think it would be malpractice for a physician to practice medicine in the way that these claim denials were, like the medical judgment, so to speak, that was reflected in those claim denials. And it was just pretty much blew my mind. Like, if not GIP, then what? I mean,
yeah, they were textbook examples, straight out of the Medicare guidance. The examples that are in those materials, these patients fit the bill.
Yeah, like you're transitioning from the hospital, potentially like as a step down, or you tried all the stuff in the home and then, it just, you can't manage these symptoms. And so, I mean, this isn't like 15 years ago where, if people are like, well, we're educating the family for 3 weeks on something or whatever. I mean, it's not that kind of stuff. So it was very disconcerting. And so this was, whatever, how do you count that many? It was like 9 figures. Is that? And then we got it down to a single, I mean, it was huge potential liability. So.
Yeah, it went from 9 figures down to $9.
That's such a great headline. Well, we should rewrite the title for this. 9, whatever that is, 9. I can't even say it. There's so many, commas there. But yeah, significant. And so, lots of experts involved in that and it's not as though we're second guessing your own physicians, but I think having the objective view of an expert physician, and then was obviously really helpful. And then multiple physicians are testifying, and and there was a lot of hand wringing throughout this whole process. And I think the challenge too is we're still getting all of this movement mostly at ALJ, and so you have to make, essentially some type of payment plan, or if you have the money to pay that, which is a very large sum, and that can put people out of business. And so it is a difficult situation to navigate, which is why I think it's never fun to deal with these situations, but I think we have so much experience behind us that I think we can really provide a level of calm to leadership and to boards and other things. So Brian, I was having like a flashback to meeting with a board on some audits in the past, because boards do get real jumpy about these kinds of things, rightfully so. But let's talk about another recent victory we had, because these came in like quick succession, because this is both winning, on the individual claim denials, but also winning on the statistics too.
Right. So I described those two pathways to do it, and we had a victory recently where we won on both pathways. We attacked each individual claim denial on clinical and technical issues and won all of those at the ALJ. And at the ALJ, we also had our statistical expert testify against the auditor's statistical expert, and the ALJ sided with us on the statistical issues. So really, it's a kind of good to win in both ways. They went to the same result, where the overpayment went from the millions to the tens of thousands, much more manageable. So that was a good victory. And right now we're in the point in the process where CMS can't appeal these past the ALJ. So it remains to be seen, is CMS going to appeal, as they often appeal adverse statistical decisions. I think they like to try to protect their statistical methodology. So in some respects, it might be better to win on the individual claims than to win on the statistical issues, because CMS is more prone to appeal when we win on statistical issues. But yeah, that was a great victory for that client. They were undergoing some financial stress, and hopefully that's going to all be alleviated.
Yeah.
You do want to raise those statistical arguments, even though there's one shorter path to success. You have to preserve those arguments. And so you definitely need to do both in those hearings.
And Brian, that was a case that we got involved in on the tail end of things. So, and obviously we really made a difference in that case. And I remember, jumping down in your office when we've gotten victories like this, breathless. Like, I wasn't doing cartwheels because that's not in my, my expertise anymore, but I was doing a lot of jumping and clapping and hooting, and because as lawyers, every day you don't get wins like this, so we should celebrate them. And
extrapolations, they can be what we call bet the company kind of issues. When you're facing, like our clients have, 3 million can be a huge imposition, but even for larger organizations, 24 million, 48 million. These are huge numbers. And so, we're ecstatic when we get those victories. And we've had a lot of victories on those lines, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, and I think that something I've learned throughout the years is that I may be jumping up and down, but I think clients sort of feel like, well, this never should have happened to begin with. And so it feels a little bittersweet to them. Because it's like, okay, great, but, and this is the general flaws in the audit process where the beginning is so different than the end. Why did we have to go through all of that and flaws in the system? But bigger policy changes need to be at play there. But Emily, as we wrap up here, tell me what you're seeing on home health and managed care in terms of extrapolation, because hospice isn't alone there.
Sure. So at least on the managed care front, I can tell you that some of the managed care organizations just aren't as sophisticated as CMS is on the extrapolation front. And they do have more discretion, I think, than some of the contractors that are working on behalf of CMS. And so those are the silver linings when we're talking about extrapolation in the managed care space. So you may see to the extent hospice gets carved in or you have other service lines, hospices may experience in those other service lines extrapolated audits on the managed care front. But it's important to do the same things that you would do in a CMS type audit, challenge the process, and hopefully you'll have some success there because of that discretion that managed care organizations have. On the home health front, so home health agencies have the Review Choice Demonstration Program with CMS.
So tell me a little bit about that, Emily. What is that?
Yeah, so CMS came up with this demonstration to reduce the impact that claim audits were having on home health agencies. And so depending on how well a home health agency does in a review conducted under that demonstration, it will affect how they are reviewed in the future. One of the options on the Review Choice Demonstration is selective post-payment review. And what we're seeing now is that the Medicare administrative contractors are actually pulling a statistically valid random sample to evaluate whether the provider is doing well in those audits. And we make this argument on our hospice audits that the sample size should be sufficient to give an accurate picture of the error rate or the errors in those claims. And be careful what you ask for, because a statistically valid random sample in this selective post-payment review can be quite a bit. We've seen them as high as 15% of claims submitted during a 6-month window, which for some providers, if you're a high volume, that is a huge number of ADRs. And so extrapolation definitely has not gone away, and it's definitely entering into the picture with other types of audits now.
Yeah. Well, Brian, any closing thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think just to touch upon, I think we've been talking a lot about Medicare, but it also can arise in Medicaid audits. So we're dealing with a number of federal UPIC audits of Medicaid payments. And they're referring to extrapolation, and sometimes it appears to me that they're referring to it, but I can't understand how they could conceivably do it because they're taking a sample from a number of different hospices. So we're trying to work through what is it that they're getting at with that extrapolation. Is it each hospice is extrapolated, or is there a bigger picture out there? But also we're working on a case now that was a state-initiated Medicaid audit that they said they are extrapolating. The information they provided regarding that extrapolation and just the way they describe it, it seems like this cannot be an extrapolation because they're talking about a non-random sample. They're not divulging information. So just be mindful that states can also, on the Medicaid side, if their regulations allow, they can extrapolate. So it's not just a Medicare thing. It's not just a hospice thing. It's multiple providers, different payer sources. Be aware of what you're getting into, because if it's an extrapolation, it really affects the strategy going forward.
I'll add to that too, real quick. There is a big difference between Medicare and Medicaid too. The Medicaid extrapolations are going to be governed by state law. So it's very important to understand the distinction between those, because you may have more arguments available to you.
Yeah, and I remember when there used to be called MICs, when you had ZPICs and MICs before they became unified under a UPIC, the Medicaid manual or the manual for MICs said that they didn't have authority to extrapolate, but times change. And I think, looking at and these Medicaid audits are always very complicated because in some ways you can align yourself with the state, right? Because it's like the federal contractor, UPIC, is looking at what claims the state paid. So they're also looking at the state's work in addition to our work. And so that also goes into, as you say, Emily, sort of different strategy that you can use when you're dealing with Medicaid audits. And because states oftentimes don't understand hospice very well. So we see sometimes a real need for education there. So anyway, well, maybe in 2 years we'll have another extrapolation still going.
I'm waiting for the extrapolation is dead podcast, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah. Well, we did have a little reprieve there sometime between before 2019, because it was back because they redid the MPIM and changed some guidance. So who knows? But great job, you guys. And there were really, really exciting victories and, hard earned, and it took years of time and effort. So congratulations. It's great news.
Thanks, Meg.
Thank you.
Awesome. Till next time.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Hospice Insights, The Law and Beyond. Thank you for joining the conversation. To subscribe to our podcast, visit our website at hushblackwell.com or sign up wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, may the wind be at your back.